Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack some truly fascinating new research on how families in Uganda use what's basically a survival portfolio to outsmart economic disaster and protect their children. You know, when we think of portfolio diversification, we almost always picture Wall Street bankers hedging their stock investments, right? But what if that exact same economic principle is being used by everyday families just to survive? Well, this new study dives into over a decade of data to show us exactly how households are pulling this off.
We are going to break this study down into 4 quick chapters: the economics of survival, the livelihood portfolio, who is diversifying, and finally, the wallet and health payoff.
So, think about it for a second. If you rely on just one single source of income, what happens when a sudden crisis hits? In a lot of the developing world, standard economic safety nets, things like unemployment insurance, they just don't exist. If your only stream of income dries up, you are immediately in crisis mode.
Chapter 1. The Economics of Survival, Facing Extreme Shocks in Uganda.
Recently, Uganda has just been battered by a relentless series of macro-level shocks, which has drastically impacted the stability of daily life there. The researchers highlight that, on top of the massive global disruptions we all saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, the country has faced some really severe environmental disasters. We're talking devastating floods in Kasese, massive landslides in the Elgin region, and literal swarms of locusts tearing through agricultural zones. And these insects can consume as much food in a single day as thousands of people. It's intense. And here is the absolute kicker. Over 68% of Ugandan households derive their primary livelihood from subsistence farming. That means their daily survival is directly tied to the land. When you combine a 68% reliance on agriculture with floods, landslides, and massive locust swarms, well, you have an incredibly vulnerable population.
Chapter 2. The Livelihood Portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
So instead of diversifying stocks and bonds, these families are diversifying their actual livelihoods. Livelihood diversification is essentially taking on side hustles to build a robust survival portfolio. Because formal insurance markets are either incomplete or just totally inaccessible, these families have to act as their own insurance providers. If the crops fail, they need a backup plan. If a family member gets sick, they have to have another stream of cash ready to go.
Looking at their baseline income mix, agricultural self-employment is definitely the heavyweight at 52%. However, a really significant chunk of households are actively piecing together other streams just to stay afloat. About 26% are pursuing non-agricultural wages, and 22% rely on remittances, which is money sent back home from relatives working somewhere else.
Chapter 3. Who is diversifying? The traits of the modern survivalist.
The data actually reveals a pretty clear divide here. Larger households, they diversify more simply because they have more hands available for labor. Educated, male-headed households, and those receiving those remittances, also diversify more because they generally have better networks and access to capital. On the flip side, older household heads tend to be a bit more risk-averse. And families that already own substantial land or happen to live in urban areas actually diversify less.
But honestly, geography dictates destiny here. The data clearly shows that proximity is power. Being physically closer to roads, markets, and border posts significantly boosts a family's ability to diversify. If you're isolated, your options are just incredibly limited. But if you live near a bustling market or a cross-border trade route, you can much more easily pick up some petty trade or wage labor right alongside your farming.
Chapter 4. The Wallet and Health Payoff, the Real-World Impact of the Side Hustle.
Okay, but first, the researchers had to solve a really tricky chicken or egg problem in their data. Does having more income sources actually make you wealthier, or do wealthy people just naturally have the means and capital to start more side hustles? If you don't untangle this reverse causality, your data is basically useless. To fix this, they used a really clever statistical technique. By isolating external factors, things like a household's distance from a market or their baseline access to credit, they could act like a filter. This allowed them to totally strip away those existing wealth advantages and isolate the direct, pure impact of a family actively choosing to add a new, distinct livelihood source to their portfolio. And the results? Incredibly validating. Adding just one more income source significantly boosts a family's total consumption. It's a measurable jump on the researcher's scale that translates directly into the ability to buy more vital goods and services. So yes, actively taking the initiative to diversify directly creates wealth.
But here is where it gets really incredible. The payoff isn't just in the wallet. That extra consumption directly impacts human development, specifically child nutrition.
The researchers measured this using height for age Z-scores. That's a standard health measurement used to determine if a child is suffering from severe stunting due to malnutrition.
So, the absolutely crucial point is this. Adding a new livelihood strategy reduces the specific probability of a child suffering from severe stunting by 0.013. Now, I know that might sound like a tiny statistical blip, but in the real world, that means a child actually gets to grow up physically healthy with properly developing cognitive functions rather than being permanently stunted just because of one bad harvest year.
It's a complete cascading effect. This survival portfolio boosts household consumption, meaning families can afford more nutritious food. It also often pairs with better access to credit and is bolstered by the experience of older mothers. All of these factors interact dynamically to shield those vulnerable kids from the harsh realities of agricultural shocks.
The ultimate takeaway here is crystal clear. As the researchers themselves summarized, households should at least run a diversified means of livelihood, since this offers a feasible way of shielding households against risks. It isn't just some abstract economic theory, it is a literal life-or-death buffer against a highly volatile world.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. If a family scraping together a few side hustles can literally help their children grow taller and healthier, imagine what true structured economic safety nets could achieve for our global future. The resilience of these households is just incredible, but the data clearly shows us that when we support multiple pathways to income, we're not just helping an economy, we are directly investing in the future of human development.